Hi, this is Martin, and welcome to my next video in which I'm looking at OI10. Although in this video I'm not really looking at OI10 at all. Um, I'm actually looking at some GDPR stuff that I've been working on for RevUK for quite a while. The company is fully DPA, Data Protection Act compliant. We followed that religiously for a good number of years. And with GDPR, we've needed to change up a few things, tighten up a few things like most people. But the main thing has been to document what we're doing from an accountability point of view. So that's come in a number of different things. I've produced a compliance document internally, and what I wanted to do is I wanted to enforce that through software and make it as easy as possible for myself and my colleagues to track everything to do with GDPR. So on the contact entry form within our contact manager, now this is my data, so I'm quite happy for this to be available. There's nothing in here that isn't really available already. So if anybody's got a problem with that, it's me. I don't have a problem with it. So on my record, I've got a tab called GDPR, and on GDPR, there, with regards to data subjects, there are a couple of things. One is the consent given for marketing primarily, and the right to be forgotten. Now, consent gets interesting because we can email most people are using the legitimate business interest rules. However, if you are going to be sending unsolicited emails or text messages or doing unsolicited phone calls, in other words, marketing, where the data subject might or might not want that communication, then you do need consent. And I've added some prompts to our website to capture that consent, and then that information is subsequently captured into our contact manager. So if, for instance, on this particular record, we had these prompts checked, and what will happen is when we are doing, let's say, an email campaign, when we're building the list, we will do a check to see whether consent was withdrawn or not given. And if that checkbox is checked, that will mean that I will not appear on that email list. I will not receive that marketing communication. In the same way, if it's unchecked, we will then go on and check to make sure that the email checkbox is checked. And if it is, we can add my email address into the campaign mailing list and we'll send out that email. However, we would not be able to follow that up by phone or by post because those options have not been checked. We've also got some dates on when consent was given. So on a periodic basis, every 2 years or whatever you've decided within your own business, we can get the consent reviewed. And on this particular consent, it's a little bit open-ended. If the end user or the data subject was giving consent based on a promotion or an event, then we might want to add a note in here to say that consent was given, but only for that short period of time and an expiry date, and then we'll need to just double check that and make sure the consent was removed at the end of that marketing campaign or at the end of that event. So we're tracking all of that within the OI system here. And then we've got right to be forgotten. A right to be forgotten is a new part of the GDPR where a data subject can contact you and say, I don't want to receive anything anymore. And what a lot of people I've spoken to are doing is they'll receive that communication and they're simply going to delete that data subject out of their systems, which is fine. And we have the ability to delete them if that's what the user requires or the data subject requires. However, I've added in an additional option here to archive their data. And the reason why I've added this option in is if you delete the data subject from your database, there is a chance that you might pick them up again on another mailing list that you buy in, or they might subscribe to something and somehow you get the information back onto the system. It might be a phone call or something. And then you're going to contact them again because you had no record of the right to be forgotten being invoked. Whereas if you archive the data, then you can set up the system so that they're archived and what date they were archived, etc., and then still have the consent flags checked. So in here, I wouldn't have these prompts. This would all be cleared out because obviously we wouldn't have deleted them, and I would probably set that up thus. So the consent was withdrawn or not given. That means we're not going to contact that client, but because we've archived the data and not deleted them, we've got that prompt to check. Obviously, if we deleted this record, that checkbox wouldn't be there. And we've also got some prompts down here for who actioned it, whether management's been notified, and the date. And also sometimes you cannot delete the data that some data subjects require. You might need it for legal reasons. Um, so if there is a refusal, then we've got the date in there, the decision was made, and obviously we've told them, and then any notes and things like that. So that's the consent and the right to be forgotten. And I've also built another module which, to be quite honest, I hope we're never going to need to go anywhere near. We haven't yet, touch wood, but if we ever do, I've built a completely separate module to manage data breach cases and data subject access requests. This is all false data, so quite happy to go into here and look at it. So under our data breaches, actually before we do that, we've got the ability to view all cases, as I'm doing here, or just our open cases. So the DPO, our data protection officer, can jump into here on a daily, weekly basis, whatever he wants, and you can see I've got one data breach case that's ongoing, and I've got one data subject access request that I need to complete. And I can set up a new one for each of those using the buttons at the top here. Now behind this is a summary view, if you will, and if you were to double click the row, it will open up the record. So let me just come back to all cases, and I'll open up this lost USB stick. Now these forms have been designed to support the workflow of, in this case, a data breach. So we've got the ability to click on the blue text here. In this case, it will bring a pop-up of all of the data breaches. This one will bring up a calendar so I can change the date or set the date, or just check the box and it will set today. I can't click this one because it will bring up personal data for other people, but this will bring up a lookup of people reporting the data breach. And then there's a decision as to whether the breach has been reported, whether it affects personal data. So if it's a yes, then obviously we need to treat this exceptionally seriously and run through the system. If it doesn't include personal data, then it's not so important because it doesn't breach the DPR, but obviously we still got a data breach. How did somebody get into the system? We might want to plug that. So at the moment we're waiting a decision. In other words, the technical guys have gone off and they're looking to see what's going on. And I've got some information boxes here. So if you click these, you get a little box that comes up. What is data, personal data, and it gives you some help text. And I've got that for all of these. So then we go into the scope and the nature and possible consequences. So what was the source of the data breach? In this instance, it was a lost USB stick, something that's going to happen quite a lot. So how many data subjects were affected? Okay, we could say there was 1,000 people on that particular database that was on the USB stick. So then we need to start asking ourselves, excuse me, is there any risk to the rights and freedoms of those 1,000 data subjects? Yes or no, or we're awaiting a decision. It's undecided. In this instance, no, so we're fine. We don't need to involve the supervisory authority, the ICO in the UK. Was there any sensitive data affected? So although we've got 1,000 data subjects on here, there may well not be any sensitive data like credit cards or medical information or anything like that. So again, no, we don't necessarily need to go public and report this thing. And then, was the data encrypted or secured? Yes, it was. So we have limited our exposure and we've mitigated any risks. So on this particular instance, we just inform people to take better care with USB sticks, make sure they're properly carried in a zip pocket, not an open pocket on a train, something along those lines. Whether any other parties involved waiting a decision, okay, well, we would have gone through and it would have been a no on this one because it was just our own data. We haven't got client data or anything like that on that particular memory stick. Now, if for instance we were yes, yes, and no, that would be a worst case scenario. So this would be flagging up straight away that the rights and the freedoms have been affected. So the data subjects need to be told there was sensitive data on there. It wasn't encrypted. So we're going to need to tell the ICO that we've got a problem. We're going to have to tell them how it happened, how we resolved the issue so it won't happen again, whether we've told people and things like that. So in this instance, the UK authority would need to know. There's no other authority because it's just UK based, so there's no European data, French or German or Italian or anything like that. And the data subject obviously needs to know as well. Um, and we could have a waiting decision from management, but obviously in this instance you would need to tell them. We can add in some text and obviously all communications. So these would be copies of emails between the DPO and management or internal people, data subjects, ICO. You've got a complete record of all of the communications relating to this case, right the way through to closure and who closed it and who signed it off. And I think that's quite important. I closed this one. Okay, that wouldn't be right because I've reported it, but I've closed it off. But we've also got to double check that management have actually said, yep, okay, we're happy, everything's been done, the corrective action's been completed, the supervisory body has been notified, and the data subjects have been notified, so sign it off, job done. We can actually close out that particular case. So that's how I'm going to be managing data breaches. Hopefully, touch wood, we'll never need to do that. But we've got a module that will help our DPO and my colleagues and myself to work through them. And the same with the data access requests. This is where a data subject wants to know what you've got on file for them. So they make a formal request, so they might phone in and we set up this case on the system, put a date in there and the person requesting the data, and then was the request received in writing. So I've asked for it to be confirmed in writing. So has it been received? No, not yet. When it has been received, have we validated the data subject to make sure that they are legitimately able to have that data? Are they who they say they are? Do they have the authority to be requesting for that data subject, etc.? And it's just making sure that we're doing the checks to make sure we're compliant with GDPR. So then has the DPO contacted everybody within the business for the files? Has he received a report or the data from everybody? Are we waiting any files? And if so, who from? Are there any data exceptions? It's a yes or no. Are there any third parties involved? So these are all of the things that we need to think about when we get a access request through. And then right the way through to was the data sent securely and how was it sent, etc. We've also got some general notes, communications backwards and forwards between people, most importantly preferably the email request, and then when the case was closed, who by, and again signed off by management, so management are comfortable that everything was done, and then obviously whether any third parties were informed, whether the data was transferred to the requester, or whether it was closed due to a lack of response from the data subject. So for instance, sometimes you'll receive a request but you won't get it in formal writing. Therefore, how seriously do you need to take this? So you ask for it in writing, you ask for it in writing again, you ask for it in writing again. If you don't get any responses back, then we can just close that off accordingly. And we've got obviously a whole GDPR consent not a consent, a GDPR compliance document, which documents all of the procedures, etc., in more detail. But this software is designed just to support that. Now, everything that I'm showing you here, I've put together over 2 evenings. I do tend to work a little bit late, so it's probably about a day and a half for a professional developer. No, I'm not a professional, but all of this was put together, building the data tables, building the lookups, building the forms and everything in a couple of evenings in OI10. So, you know, really good job, guys. It's really nice, quick, and easy to put stuff together, and I'm really glad with this little module. Anyway, that's my video. Thanks for indulging me. Catch up with you again later. Bye bye.